for those that have joined, we don't waste any of their time, and we get this done.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm going to kick it off. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the Committee on Royalston Policing for our report and recommendations. I would ask that you hold your questions to the end if you have any. If it's critical, then the instructions on the reactions, raise your hand, and we'll go from there. My name is Steve Egan. I was the committee chair, and my co-host for this event is Joe Liebman, who was the IT extraordinaire who put this show together and got the Zoom link working. Next slide, please. This was the mission statement we started with as a committee. We review current policing policies and practices, identify criminal trends and threats, and determine the level and type of policing required to mitigate those threats while safeguarding the citizens of Royalston. One of the keys to our success is what we're doing now. Transparency of our efforts and letting you know what we've done and how we got to the recommendations that we're about to present. Next slide. The committee, we met 15 times on Wednesday nights from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We started this in January. We had a subcommittee interview police chiefs from 4 surrounding neighborhoods about how they do policing, what their demographics are, their budgets, and the size of their towns. And we tried to make sure that we went like for like, similar sized towns with similar sized populations. We also reviewed thousands of pages of police logs and dispatch data from the Winchendon Police, who service our 911 calls, which we actually don't pay for. We looked at all of the data they provided. We looked at the patrol logs that were put together by our patrolmen, our officers, for what they did while they're on duty for their 8 hours. And we had a survey where we received about 140 responses from you, the citizens, which gave us very valuable insight into the understanding and opinions on Royalston policing. And all of this helped to determine what the Royalston Police Department does and what the Royalston Police Department requires to provide the necessary services for Royalston. Next slide, please. These are your committee members. There were 9 voting members, and we come from all very varied walks of life. We are all members and citizens of Royalston. We also had 2 non-voting members who were advisors. We had Chief Devino and Officer Todd Neal from the Athol Police Department. Next slide.
Excuse me.
So with all of our diverse opinions and all of the data we came up with, this committee came up with 3 unanimous recommendations for implementation. And again, we had very diverse points of view when this started. And through 15 plus meetings and our work with one another, we end up with 3 unanimous recommendations. The first of which was to hire a full-time police chief for this fiscal year, for 2026. The second was if we hire 1 or 2 full-time officers, the first hire should be a chief. We want to make sure that whoever he or she is, they are the ones that are able to build the department the way they see fit. We don't want to tie their hands before they even get started. And the final recommendation is we believe 2 full-time officers are necessary for Royalston, which would provide funding for 96 hours per week. That is basically 16 hours during the week and 8 hours each weekday. So again, we're very divided. And when Joe takes over this presentation, he'll be the first to tell you that his point of view is about 180 from where it was when we started this. We also, just so you know, we have 3 long-term recommendations that we'll cover at the end of this that we think the select board should pursue to better prepare and sustain Royalston in the long term. Next slide, please. What you need to know. Next. Royalston has only part-time employees. That's all we have right now. We are the only town that has only part-time employees in this immediate area. That model is no longer sustainable. We cannot move on with only part-time employees as we move forward. And the final thing is, without any change, there will be a crisis, and it's inevitable. We can't continue to do this as it stands, the way we're built. It will not last much longer. We are going to have to change to a full-time model, either now at our choosing or down the road where we have no police force at all. So with that, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Joe. He has the history, so he's going to tell you the story of how we got here and our recommendations for where we're going. Joe, you're up. Thank you.
So in 2020, the state legislature passed a bill that did had tremendous reform on the policing, and it kind of set us on a path towards the situation that we're in now. And this is something that has been a problem for Royalston for a while now. And unfortunately, the attempts to communicate on this topic really haven't been sufficient to really give the people of Royalston the information they needed so that they understood just how bad the situation had gotten. To give you an understanding of what the changes were in 2020 and why they've had such a big impact on us, we have a part-time police force, right? And so before 2020, not a problem, right? There were lower training requirements for part-time officers than full-time officers. There were 9 weeks of evening classes, 372 hours of training. So what that meant was part-time policing was a really good job for retired police officers, or more frequently with Royalston, people that, maybe had their second kid, were looking for a little bit of extra money and went to night school, right, for 9 weeks and were able to pick up shifts on the weekend that would allow them to, be a police officer. After 2020, though, all officers had to have the same training requirements, whether you're going to work 1 shift a month or 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You had to go to a full-time 5-month academy. So you're now looking at, not something you could do at night, but something where you're going to have to take off 5 months and likely not have an income during that time. And more than doubled your training of 800 hours. And then now there's a strict 40-hour annual training requirement for all the officers that they have to go and get additional training. And if you don't, you simply can't work. So what this did was it shut down the pipeline of part-time officers, right? The night school does not exist anymore. And it's not just us that have had this problem, right? The towns around us have done many things, but they've all kind of moved over to full-time officers. Some have tried regionalization. Full-time chiefs are definitely something that they've looked to. Unfortunately, though, all of this comes with increased budgets. An unavoidable cost moving from part-time to full-time is a significant jump in the budget. And the largest cost, the reason that budget jumped so much is we're now providing benefits to employees who previously didn't qualify for them. And you'll see later in the presentation just how much of the increased cost those benefits are. So where are we today? So since the reform was implemented, the number of our PED officers went from 18 to 7, right? And it feels like 7 should be enough to run a police department, right? But here's the reality. The chief does not patrol. We have 1 officer who is able to patrol Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day. Our third officer only is able to go on 2 patrols a month. Fourth officer has a full-time job somewhere else and can only do Sundays and Mondays. And then 3 more part-time officers that have full-time policing jobs elsewhere, and they're all available on the weekends and weekdays, but their primary responsibility is their full-time job. So we can only get them when they're not occupied otherwise, which means that the entire viability of Royalston Police rests on Josh LaMarche, right? Sergeant LaMarche. If for some reason Sergeant LaMarche wins the lottery tomorrow, or God forbid, something happens to him, Royalston has no police. And it could take us up to a year before we have policing during the week again. Right? That's how precarious the situation we're in. So the current coverage plan that we're budgeted for is Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours, but the times vary. And then overnights, they're on call, right? Someone is paid for an hour's work to answer the page if it comes in overnight. But here's the problem, and it's already started. Since there's no longer the pipeline, since we no longer have 18 part-time officers, we're not able to fill shifts. So last year, 12.6% of the shifts went unfilled. This year, we're on track for 20% of the shifts. So 1 in 5 shifts, there is no police officer available. And it's worse with overnights. So this 82 number was as of our last meeting. It's gone up since. Unfortunately, we don't have the new number yet. But as of our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, 58% of the overnights, there was no officer who had signed up for coverage. Right. So that means that, we are really so understaffed that nearly 6 in 10 nights, we don't have someone assigned to respond. And that's why, we have an increase of nights where RPD is just not able to respond, right, to a 911 call in the evening. Now, that doesn't mean that no one responds, right? Eventually, the state police will come, right? In certain circumstances, maybe someone from Winchendon. But the reality is that we have a long response time. And the state police has made clear for the past year or two that this is not a short-term thing, that they are not budgeted for to pick up this slack, right? They're not going to continue to do it. And so we really have to find a solution on our own. Also, that state police barracks covers all the way to Leominster. So if in an emergency, you better hope that the officers, the patrolmen the state troopers are not in Leominster, right? Or somewhere in between, right? The waits can be very, very long. So what should you know about the RPD? So I think it's, not news to anyone that we are pretty big, right? Royalston is the 24th largest town by land area in the state of Massachusetts. And as you can see, it's not as if we have crime is only a problem here in the bad part of town, or I'm just arbitrarily circling. The answer is it's everywhere, right? They have, right, to patrol the entire town, and it's a lot for them to do, right? What does it look like crime-wise? Now, we we tend to go to bed early, right? If you look in the morning, crime really, or the need for the Royalston police doesn't really pick up until around 9 a.m., right? 8 or 9 a.m., and we kind of go to bed early, right? It's not really an overnight problem. So here's a quote from one of our respondents to the survey, who said that we should only provide a 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. shift. And as you can see, that's just not going to cover it, right? We really do need 7 to 11, right? That is when most of our issues occur. Hold on just one second. Michael, Ava keeps calling me. I'm sorry, our niece keeps calling, and I want to make sure she's okay. Thanks. Ava, call Ava. Uh, as you can see here are now the distribution of 911 calls. It's very similar to the total police activity calls. Right. And so what does the policing look like? Right. First of all, we're the single officer on patrol is also the Royalston Community School resource officer, right? They're also driving around 20,000 miles per year, which is the equivalent to driving every road in town 275 times. They are heavily patrolling recreation areas like Dones, Royalston, Tully, Birch Hill, and they're doing their best at speed enforcement. But again, there's not a lot of time for these officers to be doing these things. Mainly what they focus on, right? It's not the issue of we're not a high crime town, we don't need a full-time department, and let the state police handle our town. So in addition to what we talked about before about the timing and the state police not willing to do it, the type of policing that makes up the majority of Royalston policing are things like 4 black and white goats loose on Stone Road. Right. Keep the peace while a mom moves kids out of in-laws' house. Check unsecured door. Check unsecured door was actually me. I was out of town. Our front door somehow blew open, and I got a call from Officer LaMarche letting me know that they were in my house and that they had looked around and that nothing looked like it had been stolen. It didn't look like a break-in, but that they wanted to reassure me and that they were going to lock the door and leave. Right? That's the level of policing and the type of policing that Royalston has. Welfare check. Welfare check is a big one, right? Lots of welfare checks, making sure we are not on top of each other. This is not New York City. You can't scream and be heard. We are very spread out in this town, and a lot of welfare checks are frequently turn up that someone in need. Intoxicated teens diving at Dones Falls. Located 2 lost hikers. The last time we did this, the chief made very clear that this is a very frequent thing. The summer is nothing but lost hikers around here. Dispute over who gets the dog, vehicle lockout, car running, 2 ATVs ripping up South Royalston Road, de-escalate fight between brother and sister, administrative service of the license to carry permits. This is not policing that the state police will do. This is the majority of the policing that the Royalston police are doing. And it's policing that without it, we would have an extremely diminished quality of life. It's necessary to keep what we really love about Royalston working. So let's look at the neighboring towns, right? They've all gone to full-time chiefs and officers. They have significantly more coverage than Royalston, and we're the only town left operating on a part-time model. So currently the budget is $163,000, wages and expenses, and that's for 7 part-time, including the chief, as we talked about. Leverett and Wendell now have 4 full-time officers, 3 part-time officers, and they patrol 18 hours a day. And they're spending $343,000, so more than double. Phillipston, same thing. 4 full-time officers, 3 part-time officers. They patrol 18 hours a day, right? And Petersham is the closest to us in price, but still almost double, right? They have 2 full-time officers, 8 part-time officers, and 1 reserve officer, again, providing 16 hours a day of coverage. Royalston's tax rate, yes, is significantly lower than that of our neighbors. The recommended model that we're putting forward, though, is designed to be as efficient as possible. Right? Our tax rate is the lowest in the area by far, right? Our town budget, lowest in the area by far. But we still have the same, if not more, miles of roads to patrol, right? We still have a population that is, not as small as it might feel. And when we went out to the residents and asked them what they thought coverage was, their expectations of what was being covered are currently not budgeted for, right? And the majority of the residents were willing to vote for an increase to kind of get that patrol volume. So the question that was interesting was, regardless of time of day, when I dial 911, I expect the Royalston Police Department to respond, right? A clear majority of people, right, think that an officer from the Royalston Police Department is going to be coming, right? And as we talked about before, in 58% of the evenings so far this year, that would not be the case, right? And if someone does come, likely the state police, it could be, a 45-minute wait. And again, a significant number are willing to vote to increase the amount of the budget in order to get increased patrols. And so we took that information and looked at it as kind of the support we needed when considering what we were going to do as the option. Now, if the budget override doesn't pass, the wages will stay at $130,000, right? Of that will be $34,000 and change that we pay to Chief Devono, right? Who will continue to be a non-patrolling chief. If the override does pass, Chief Devono will be stepping down and a full-time chief will be hired in his place, and that $34,000 will be repurposed towards that end. Essentially, we're gambling that the current staffing holds, right? What we talked about is not voting for the override is crossing our fingers and hoping that Officer Lamar sticks around and that we don't lose any other of our part-time officers. Best case scenario, an increasing number of days and overnight shifts go unfilled. So it was 20% this year. It was 12% the year before. It could be between 25 and 30% of the shifts where no officer is on duty. Worst case scenario, no policing except on weekends and rare weekdays when part-time staff are not at their full-time jobs. And that's not a scare tactic. Like, that's a real possibility. There's a very fine line between where we're at now and that being the reality. And of course, increased response times for 911 calls and decreased community policing. So what we're unanimously recommending, and is fully in line with what we've heard from the residents, is a full-time chief who patrols and takes calls, right? We no longer can afford a part-time chief who doesn't take calls. One additional full-time officer, because again, the part-time officers that we have are basically good for filling in weekend shifts, right? But they are not available during the week and at the times where we need them. And then, that part-time officer support. So full-time officers is the only solution that guarantees consistent coverage. All right. So we'll add a second shift for 16 hours of coverage. So we'll go from 7 to 11, right, where the majority of the police activity is needed. And then on the weekends, we'll have coverage from Saturday to Sunday for 8 hours. And that will be through mostly the part-time officers that we have now. And then with this, though, we will be able to make sure, more importantly, that overnight coverage, the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the one that we've missed 58% of the time this year, that there's always someone on on-call coverage overnight. So what does that mean? In order to get there, we're going to have to increase wages by $78,000. So we'll go from $130,000 to $208,000. Expenses will stay the same. at $33,000 for a total fiscal year budget of $241,000, considerably less than all the other towns we talked about. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the problem is that full-time benefits are $94,000, and it's just unavoidable. And the reality is, it's a big hit. It's a lot of money. But we have no choice but to go to a full-time police department, and this is the cost of full-time policing. It is a one-time dramatic jump in what we'll be spending, but it is impossible to do the policing in Massachusetts with a part-time force. And so, unfortunately, this is the cost of full-time policing. So the total budget override we'd be asking for is $172,000 and change. Now, what will that mean for you? The annual property tax increase would be $78.59 per $100,000 of assessed home value. So the average home in Royalston is worth $350,000 of as assessed by the tax collector. So that would equal $275 in additional taxes a year. We do not take this lightly, right? We realize that this is a lot of money. Unfortunately, there's just not a choice, right? It's between this and not having a very real chance of not having any police officers on duty. So what does that do? It ensures the situation does not deteriorate into a crisis, which I think everyone would agree would be the case if we lost a police officer and were forced to go without Monday to Friday policing for up to a year, right? It's unfortunately, it is that unavoidable one-time leap in cost. And while this is a huge jump, right, it is that one-time jump, right? The new cruiser, which actually just arrived. Last time I gave this, I spoke about the fact that it will come eventually with very little confidence, but it is here. It is driving on the streets, and there are no new capital costs for RPD for the foreseeable future. So yes, this will be a bump, and it isn't a small one, but it is one that is unfortunately inevitable. So again, our unanimous recommendations: hire a full-time police chief. Make sure that the first hire is the chief, and then hire two full-time officers, funding a full 96 hours per week. And then the three long-term recommendations that Stephen alluded to: let's put additional effort into researching regionalization of the police department. It's not gone unlooked for. Unfortunately, merging with Athol or Winchendon, it was incredibly cost prohibitive. It was several times more expensive than this the last time it was looked at. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't work in the future and be more economical. But our suggestion is for the select board to continue pushing for an economic solution that is able to work with regionalization. And then if as much as possible, include this kind of thinking in the Royalston 2050 project, so that in the future, we're doing this as economically and efficiently as possible, as well as delivering the policing that Royalston needs to maintain its quality of life. So, are there any questions? I'm going to change it so that you can unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, we will be available to answer questions at the town meeting on Saturday, and I thank everyone for attending. Stephen, is there anything that you would like to say?
I just want to thank everybody who was able to call in tonight. And Joe, I want to thank you for all your effort in putting this together and the delivery. I appreciate it. I hope this answers the questions people have had in the past about what the police do, where the money goes, and why we're asking for this from the town. and what the town gets for it. So I thank everybody for being here. And like Joe said, we'll be there on Saturday at town meeting. I hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.